Hey, what's up everybody and welcome back to News Toast. And do you remember all those rumors about a year or so ago claiming that a quote-unquote Switch Pro was imminent? Of course we do, because it was plastered all over the place. And in fact, we've been pretty much hearing about a Switch revision since the beginning of the Nintendo Switch's life cycle. I mean, you know, it is what it is, but this is always ongoing. What I will say, though, is that last year, things were just a little bit different because we had some high-profile outlets, such as Bloomberg, leak out some information as well. So at the time, it really did seem like things might just be legitimate. But of course, we all know how that all kind of played out. We got the Switch OLED instead, which, by the way, I'm not trying to downplay that device. I love that thing myself. But according to a new inside tip, it actually does sound like there were plans for a Switch revision after all. Will that Switch Pro happen soon, though? Well, we'll talk about all of that today. Also, we will be talking about Xbox Game Pass because it sounds like they might have struck a deal to get some more exciting Japanese titles, and this will be another monumental announcement if this does indeed turn out to be true. So, yeah, lots to get into today, but let's just go and get right into things, starting off with Deathloop. Of course, Deathloop released on Xbox a few months back. It's been available on PlayStation and PC for a while, but now that it's out on all obvious platforms, there is that question. What will Arcane do next? Well, actually, if you enjoy Deathloop and if you're maybe hoping for some more, well, it sounds like that could possibly happen. Yeah, so this is coming from an interview with the voice actors of Colt and Juliana, and the voice actor for Colt seemingly accidentally let it slip that Arcane is still working on something Deathloop related. He was asked on whether or not he knew the codename that they hired him under for Deathloop, and which he quickly responded, "Yes, I can't say the codename for Deathloop because they're still sometimes hiring us under the codenames." Now, immediately you can see that he recognizes blunder here, as his eyes, I mean, they just lit up. I'll go and include a picture on here so you can see it for yourself, but that's a face of, I know, I just made a mistake. And in fact, the voice actress for Juliana slightly mentioned, "I can tell you nothing." While Colt goes on to say, "Did I say something that I shouldn't have?" So, yeah, that is very interesting and quite possibly telling. If Arcane is in fact still hiring under the same codename that they used for Deathloop, that seemingly points to a few different possibilities. They could either be working on a sequel, or this could also be for a brand new expansion. Arcane has put out some expansions in the past for Dishonored, so I wouldn't necessarily rule that out, especially now that it is available for Xbox as well. I imagine that they wanted to get Deathloop out on all platforms before putting out an expansion, if that is indeed the direction that they want to take. One way or the other, though, based on what we're hearing here, it absolutely does sound like more Deathloop could be on the horizon. Next up, we got a Pokemon update that seems to be sparking some speculation online, and this is for a Pokemon X and Y trademark renewal. Unfortunately, we're still waiting for that Scarlet and Violet performance patch. I'm hoping for some news on that front sometime here soon, but in the meantime, this new trademark renewal has kicked up some speculation that Nintendo and the Pokemon Company are gearing up for an X and Y remake next, which would certainly be uncharacteristic. If that were to happen, that would mean that they would skip out on Black and White, so I doubt that's what this is. That means that they just leave money on the table for Black and White to go straight to X and Y. I don't see that. Now, I do believe they will revisit X and Y eventually with a remake, as we've seen with every other title, but as for right now, Black and White does come first, so yeah, I think that is highly, highly doubtful. Another thing, though, that I have seen fans bring up, though, is the possibility of revisiting the Kalos region as an expansion for Scarlet and Violet, and that's maybe why they renewed this trademark for X and Y. There is some belief that an expansion would have fans going to the southern part of the Kalos region. The theory here is that Scarlet and Violet is based on Spain, and since X and Y is based on France, they could tie the two together with an expansion. Now, we'll see about all that, but there's also another possibility here, and this might actually be the most likely. This trademark renewal could just simply be Nintendo doing business per usual. It's pretty normal for companies to renew trademarks, protect their IP and everything, and considering we are moving into X and Y's 10-year anniversary, it might be time to renew its trademark. However, I will say this, though, I do kind of like the idea of an X and Y expansion for Scarlet and Violet, even if it doesn't turn out to be true. X and Y is actually among my favorite entries for the franchise, so if they want to go ahead and bring a little bit of that over to Scarlet and Violet, I'm all for it. All right, so let's go and move on over to this Nintendo Switch news, because this is an interesting story. We've really talked about a Switch Pro pretty much all generation long. I feel like every single year there has been at least one rumor of this supposed Switch revision. And I mean, especially in 2021. This is when things really started to hit the fan. We started to see all of these different reports from places like Bloomberg. And they were claiming that this thing was going to have a 7-inch Samsung OLED display, which that was actually indeed correct. That's what we got with the Switch OLED. But they also claimed that it was going to output 4K resolution in docked mode. It was supposed to utilize NVIDIA DLSS 2.0 for improved visuals, which, I mean, it all sounded great on paper. We've seen the improvements that DLSS 2.0 can make, and I'm sure that would have majorly benefited the Switch. But unfortunately, this just never came to fruition. We instead ended up getting the Switch OLED, which again, by the way, I really like that console. But at the time, a lot of people just believed that outlets leaking that information simply got it wrong. Well, according to Digital Foundry's John Linneman, that might not actually be the case. According to him, there indeed was a Switch revision plan at one point in time. Now, he doesn't mention the specifics here, but in considering everything that happened in 2021, I imagine that's the year that we're probably talking about. Let's just go and take a look at what he had to say, though. So he said, I think at one point internally, from what I can understand from talking to different developers, is that there was some sort of mid-generation Switch update planned at one point, and that seems to be no longer happening. And thus, it's pretty clear that whatever they do next is going to be the actual next-generation hardware. I don't think it's going to be 2023. So there's three parts to this statement. First of which is that his sources are developers. I think considering that and just knowing that Digital Foundry has a good reputation, that does at the very least add some weight to this claim. And it also kind of lines up with some of the things that we were hearing back in 2021. There were some rumors back then that Nintendo canned their Switch Pro aspirations because manufacturing chains were having a lot of issues. If you remember right, all consoles were selling out rapidly at that point, and there was supposedly some concern that they wouldn't be able to stock this Switch Pro alongside their other models in an easy-to-do way. Hence, the Switch OLED instead. That was a theory. And, well, there might have actually been some truth to that, because we are once again hearing about how this thing got canceled. Does that necessarily mean, though, that they'll eventually make a Switch Pro? Well, as he mentioned here, and I think what he does say makes sense, a mid-generation refresh in year 6 doesn't really make that much sense. I think most of us kind of understand this, but we're a lot closer to the end than the beginning. So it kind of feels like by this point, when we see an upgrade, it'll just be for that next generation Nintendo console, whatever and whenever that may be. That's kind of the thing here, though, because he ends his quote by saying he doesn't believe it will release in 2023. Now, I don't know if that necessarily comes off as a major surprise when I put a poll up of this before. It does seem like most of you all believe it will be in 2024 when we see that next generation Nintendo console. But when I read this specific quote, it to me comes off as speculation rather than inside information. Now, he does later on say he believes Nintendo is likely nervous about their next generation transition, considering what we've seen from Nintendo in the past. And I mean, if you think about it, the Wii exploded coming off the GameCube, but then when it came to the Wii U, I mean, it was an abysmal failure. So yeah, Nintendo could actually be a little nervous about a transition. I think that does logically make sense, but I don't know if I necessarily view it the same way. See, there was an actual reason that the Wii U did not have success. The thing about the Wii is that console, it was different. It was a cultural phenomenon that can be described as a fad. Yes, it was extremely popular, but not necessarily because of core gamers per se. Instead, it was because motion controls at the time, they were new, and it really grabbed that casual market, and everybody and their grandmothers were rapidly buying them out. People wanted Wii Fit, people wanted to do the Wii boxing, the golf and all of that, and it really grabbed that casual market. The problem, though, is that, again, it didn't necessarily win over core gamers. Yes, there were some core gamers as well, no doubt about it, but a large portion of the Wii sales came from what we call the casual market. And, well, the casual market, they moved on. Once mobile games started to take off, that was the next big thing for them, and they quickly forgot about Nintendo. So the Wii U, which played off the Wii's success, a lot of people who bought the Wii, they didn't even realize the Wii U was a new console. They just thought that thing was an expensive tablet peripheral. It caused a lot of confusion in reality. So they just didn't have that community that carried over to their next device. But I don't necessarily see that as an issue for the Nintendo Switch. This is a vastly, vastly different situation. Really, all Nintendo has to do, don't overthink it. Just make your next device, once again, a hybrid console. Just make it more powerful and manage to have backwards compatibility. If they do that, I guarantee their next console will be a home run hit. Nintendo still has that market lockdown. They have always really succeeded when it comes to their handheld consoles, whether that be with the Game Boy, the Game Boy Advance. You had the DS, which to this day is one of the best-selling consoles ever made. There was also the 3DS that it wasn't as successful as the DS, but it still sold very, very well. They just do extraordinary when it comes to their handheld consoles. And the Nintendo Switch, while it's a hybrid device, it still has that heritage there, and you can see that. Their games, they feel perfect on a handheld console, and it also separates them from their main competitors being Xbox and PlayStation. Now, I know the Steam Deck kind of enters the fold here. It's kind of similar, but Nintendo has really cemented themselves as that go-to handheld console manufacturer. The only thing I kind of worry about here, though, is if Nintendo tries to do something completely different. That's a part of who they are. They even suggested that earlier this year. When they look at new generations and when it's time to bring out a new device, they try and find new ways for gamers to play their games. And okay, that's fine and everything. They can absolutely try something new. But again, just keep that handheld form factor, make it more powerful, and you're good to go. Also, backwards compatibility. That's very important. Just don't overthink it, Nintendo. That's all I'm saying. With that said, we'll eventually get to see for ourselves. But as for what John Linneman said about not releasing in 2023, I could very much see this being a 2024 console, whatever it may be. But, as I've said before, don't be surprised if we start seeing leaks for whatever this next device might be sometime in 2023. That's the thing I think we need to kind of watch out for next year. Moving on to our final piece of news, though, there's a new rumor going around that Xbox might have snagged another deal with Sega and Atlus. Of course, this year they finally encouraged them to grow a brain just a little bit and bring the Persona franchise over to other devices, including Xbox and the likes of Xbox Game Pass. This really was a monumental announcement. For whatever reason, Persona has typically remained a PlayStation exclusive, despite it being very, very obvious to most fans out there that they can have success elsewhere, especially when it comes to Nintendo. That was always a no-brainer, and it's beyond me that it took Atlus this long to get these games on a Nintendo platform. But whatever the case may be, Persona is finally multi-platform, and I'm absolutely thrilled by that fact. I hope everybody's enjoying Persona 5 Royal right now, and of course next month you all can also enjoy Persona 3 and Persona 4 Golden as well. Persona 4 Golden is my own personal favorite, so definitely go check that one out. I know 5 Royal is more popular, but 4 Golden, that's the one for me. However, Atlus isn't just strange with Persona, though, but also with its parent IP being Shin Megami Tensei. It's actually kind of weird how they've managed to do this. Again, I don't know about Atlus sometimes. They make good games and everything, but their business sense is just kind of wow. But basically, they've somehow managed to primarily make the Persona franchise a PlayStation exclusive, and then, for whatever reason, when it comes to Shin Megami Tensei, it's more closely related to Nintendo. Again, it makes no sense whatsoever, but Shin Megami Tensei 4 was a 3DS exclusive. I mean, I guess to be fair, the Vita wasn't really super popular, so okay. But then 5, as of this moment, is a Switch game. However, that might actually be changing. So this is according to Nick Baker over on the Xbox Era podcast, and he let it be known that he's heard the Xbox has struck a deal with Atlus to bring over Shin Megami Tensei to Xbox in a similar way to what they did with Persona. Now, he does admit that he doesn't know much about the Shin Megami Tensei franchise, and he's not necessarily sure if this includes Xbox Game Pass or not. Now, considering he does say that it's similar to what they did with Persona, though, you can kind of make your assumptions here. It does make sense after all. I think putting these type of games directly into Xbox Game Pass is a great way for these Japanese developers to grow a fan base for the long term. And that is something that we have seen a lot of. Phil Spencer has made it a mission to bring over more Japanese games, and I think he's done a pretty good job with that. Not just with Persona, but also with Nier. They've managed to get Yakuza, Ni no Kuni, Tales of Arise, and the list just kind of goes on and on and on. And something about a lot of those games is that they've also appeared in Game Pass. So it's certainly in the realms of possibility that Shin Megami Tensei could be a part of Game Pass sometime in the future. At the same time, though, he did mention that he doesn't know the timeline of this and that it could be a long wait. So with that in mind, don't expect imminent news or anything like that. Now, with all that said, though, even though this is only rumored for Xbox as of this moment, I do think that PlayStation fans, they need to perk up for this news as well, because again, if you look at what happened with Persona, they didn't just announce that for Xbox. Yes, it's coming to Xbox Game Pass, but they also announced it for pretty much everything. So if Atlus is looking to port Shin Megami Tensei to Xbox, it's also very possible that these games could be heading to PlayStation as well. Now, as for which titles, I imagine that we're at least talking about Shin Megami Tensei 5, their latest installment. Maybe SMT4, though that was a 3DS title, so a little bit less likely for that one. But if you have been eyeing the SMT5, it sounds like it is a very real possibility that it could maybe be ported down the road. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, what new game releasing in January of 2023 are you most looking forward to? It's still hard to believe that 2023 is in just a few days. But if you take a look here, the most anticipated game for next month is Dead Space Remake with 52% of the votes. Then 14% of you all voted for Fire Emblem Engage, 11% for Forspoken, then 10% voted for SpongeBob the Cosmic Shake, and 13% voted for Other. So yeah, a lot of you all seem to be very excited for Dead Space Remake, and honestly, that's the exact game that I'm going to go ahead and vote for as well. I'm also really looking forward to SpongeBob, to be fair. You all know I'm a big 3D platformer fan, but I mean, when it comes to Dead Space, you're talking about one of the all-time great horror experiences ever made, and that remake, it looks absolutely gorgeous. But I think what this list kind of tells me is that 2023 is getting off to a fantastic start. I mean, not only do you have these 4 games here, but you also have Monster Hunter Rise, that's coming over to PlayStation and Xbox next month. Then you have Persona 3 and Persona 4 coming to all platforms next month in January. I saw several of you all mention these games in the comments, and yeah, when you add those on top of these 4 games, 2023 is getting off to a great start. And that's really the thing here, because the first half of 2023, it looks absolutely jam-packed. Fun times ahead. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you like the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.